that anything said in the virtual platform is deemed to have been said to the House, and it may be ruled upon. All members who have logged in shall be considered to be present and are requested to mute their microphones and only unmute when voice may disturb the attention of other members. Mute some of this
Chair, we can't hear you.
We have lost you, Chair, completely.
Chairperson speaking Chinese.
Good afternoon, honourable members. Order, honourable member, that comment is not warranted. You may cause offence to certain groups in this country by saying that.
Apologies,
honourable members, our apologies for the break in the transmission. We will proceed now with the debate, and we will request the Honourable Minister of Higher Education to address this virtual plenary. The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson of the House, Mr. Frolik. Honourable members, cabinet colleagues who are present, our Deputy Minister, Honourable Butimana Mela, Chairperson, Mr. Philip Mapulane of the Portfolio Committee, and all other honourable members of the committee. Senior management of my department, chairs and CEOs of our entities, and heads of our post-school education and training institutions, student and worker leaders, ladies and gentlemen and comrades. We meet at a time when we are confronted with the scourge of the coronavirus epidemic, which brought with itself unprecedented changes in the manner in which government and society works, and how both public sector and private business is conducted, and how we should prioritize and manage our health affairs in particular. As a sector, also not been spared were to adopt new ways of providing learning and teaching by introducing blended education platforms, which includes integrating technological learning and physical delivery of education and teaching materials. Together with our institutions, both universities and TVET colleges, we began the process of providing data to our students through negotiated rates with mobile operators. Moderated by Treasury and managed by the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, we are now finalizing the process of appointing service providers for the provision of electronic devices, especially laptops, to NSFAS-funded students. This initiative will add on already the process of provision of laptops by some 65% of our universities already. As a department, working with NSFAS and institutions, we are working on policy amendments that will allow for the NSFAS learning materials allowance to be utilized for gadgets in future for NSFAS students. We will put this policy change in place for 2021. Honorable Chair and members, we are paying serious attention on issues regarding future student funding considerations, the issue of high levels of student debt, funding for missing middle and postgraduate students. I would like to thank the majority of the universities who have already put in place mechanisms to provide data and devices to their students, and in some instances, even including missing middle students. Our ministerial task team on the fourth industrial revolution, I'm pleased to say, has now completed its work to provide critical policy advice on how our post-school institutions are going to be affected by these technological changes. I intend to publicly release this report for debate and discussion so that the sector can engage with it before I make recommendations to Cabinet. As part of the 5-year labor market intelligence program, we've commissioned research to inform the publication of the list of occupations in high demand and priority occupations, also helping Home Affairs in this regard. The National Skills Fund has allocated 84 million rands for research to support the development of these skills priority lists. We also continue to prioritize artisan development, and our Deputy Minister will elaborate on this matter. We have also identified that in order to increase access to education and training, the TVET sector remains a key partner in the realization of increasing provision of occupational programs. All our 50 public TVET colleges will benefit over 20,000 learners with access to training opportunities through a 2.1 billion rands NSF funding window. And also the NSF has allocated about 2.5 billion rands to build or refurbish TVET infrastructure for 11 colleges. Also, what is very important and which I'm very happy about is that coupled with the TVET infrastructure is the rollout of last mile internet connectivity to all our 50 TVET campuses throughout all our 50 TVET colleges and all its 270 campuses through the coordinating and funding of 350 million rands. I'm also pleased to say, Honorable Chair and members, that the report of the Ministerial Task Team on the recruitment, retention, and progression of Black South African academics, especially Black women academics, has concluded its work, and I have already authorized this report to be publicly released for debate. Both my departments will also be looking at the recommendations that will be made, both in the report as well by the public, to finalize this. We are also proceeding with the Staffing South Africa's Universities Framework, which now has got a number of very important programs of transformation, like Nurturing Emerging Scholars Program, New Generation of Academics Program, the University Staff Doctoral Program, Future Professors Program, and the Higher Education Leadership and Management Program. I have also appointed, I wish to say, a ministerial task team on the remuneration, on the matter of the remuneration of vice chancellors and senior executives, as recommended by the Portfolio Committee. The team will submit the research results and recommendations to me by 31st of March next year. I'm also pleased to announce that I've also appointed a ministerial task team to conduct an independent review of the University of South Africa, UNISA. Given the size of UNISA, not only in South Africa, but on the entire African continent, with around 407,000 students in 2020 and still growing, it is clearly too big to fail. This review will also focus on the mandate of UNISA as well as outstanding matters after the merger. But at the same time, we are looking at amending the Higher Education Act in the main to address matters of governance. I must say that since 1998, we have had 15 independent assessors, and I'm also worried about universities that are continuously being placed under administration, more than once, some of them. As a component of transformation in the higher education sector, I will also soon publish the revised language policy framework for the public higher education institutions in the government gazette. This will aim at strengthening African languages in higher education. I also wish to say that Cabinet has recently approved a policy framework for the whole post-school education and training sector to fight gender-based violence. And the task now is to mainstream this policy framework into all our PSET institutions. Also, our aim still remains to increase total enrollment by 2030 in universities to reach 1.62 million as contained in the RDP. At the postgraduate level, we expect increase in enrollments, although we are faced with a number of challenges and a dilemma. Do you give part funding and fund more, or do you give full funding and fund less? We are looking into this matter, the two departments. In April 2019, the draft Central Application Service Bill was published for public comment. I intend to start piloting the Central Application Service from 2022. Our revised curricula also for TVET colleges are now in the evaluation phase in order to make the learning outcomes current and relevant to workplace practices. Lecturer development continues for TVET colleges is one of my priority areas, and the early work for the establishment of a lecturer training institute in Gauteng has begun in order to mainstream TVET lecturer development programs. The establishment of new TVET lecturer qualifications and associated programs and their offering by universities is well underway. Already 14 universities are developing such programs. Honorable Chair and honorable members, 2019 and 2020 financial year, the Community Education and Training College system has adopted a national sector plan, which is informed by the white paper on post-school education and training implementation plan. Our aim here is to actually make our community education and training center not only to provide formal academic education for those who want to continue, but also to offer skills programs. And to this extent, we are bringing together these colleges to work closely with our SETAs, the National Skills Fund, and TVET colleges, as well as with the non-governmental organizations in our universities. There is also collaboration between Technology Innovation Agency, which is an agency of my Department of Science and Innovation, to build ICT infrastructure centers as pilots, which will serve as hubs where communities and young people in particular can access services, connect and experience the benefit of the technology from the most of the rural areas. I'm pleased about this because this is one product already concretely in bringing together the two departments, higher education and training, and science and innovation. We are committed, Chairperson and members, to strengthening and developing the PSET sector by providing infrastructure. For example, over the period 2021 to 2022-23, we will still see substantial investment of infrastructure of 11.486 billion rands across our 26 universities. We will continue to prioritize infrastructure development at historically disadvantaged universities. I wish to inform the House that I'm currently in the process of restructuring and streamlining infrastructure management within my Department of Higher Education and Training. I will soon be appointing a Ministerial Advisory Team on Infrastructure, MAKI, as well as establish, working together with the DBSA, an Infrastructure Project Management Office with a particular focus on student accommodation. We will indeed also seek to mobilize investment and establish partnerships with the private sector in order to accelerate provision of student accommodation, in particular within the framework of the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Committee. Honorable Chair and members, amid the world pandemic, we had to revise our appropriation, nevertheless, to ensure that we bring about a successful completion to the academic year. 2.1 billion rands from the state subsidy and transfer has been reprioritized as a COVID-19 response mechanism for universities, for both teaching and learning. Our budget appropriation, therefore, which we request you to adopt, university education will just be getting over 79 billion rands. I've got the details in my speech, the exact rands and cents. TVET colleges will be getting just over 13 billion, skills development 300 million, community education 2.5 billion, planning policy and strategy 198 million, and so on and so on. In conclusion, let me thank the Honorable President, the Deputy President, and my cabinet colleagues, Deputy Minister Manamela, the Chairperson and members of the Portfolio Committee for the support and guidance. In particular, the members of the African National Congress, my party. Gratitude also goes to my wife that I've been more or less somewhat locked with during this difficult time for her support and motivation, my staff in the ministry, to my Director General and the entire management. Let me also thank the boards and councils of all our institutions and everybody who contributed towards the achievement of our mandate as the department. With those words, let's grow South Africa together. And I'm very pleased, honorable members, that you all look sound and safe because your country needs you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. The next speaker is the Honorable Mapulane.
Thank you very much, House Chairperson, Honorable Minister and Deputy Minister, honorable members, and fellow South Africans. COVID-19 has had an immense impact in the education sector across the world. It is estimated by experts that 1.5 billion students, which is 90% of all primary, secondary, and tertiary students in the world, are no longer able to physically go to school as a result of COVID-19. Our own South African higher education system has not been spared the impact of the global COVID pandemic. The announcement by President Ramaphosa of the lockdown on 26 March brought the academic activities in post-school education and training institutions to an abrupt halt. The nation's singular focus became to save the lives of South African citizens. None of us was ready for the events which unfolded. The longer the period of lockdown and its subsequent alert levels, the severity of the impact on the sector, particularly the 2020 academic year. We are satisfied, Honorable House Chair, with the initiatives and measures brought about by Minister Nzimande in mitigating the adverse impact of the pandemic on the sector, which includes the following: the establishment of the Ministerial Task Team, including the stakeholders in the post-school education and training sector to find ways of returning to academic activities. The introduction of a system of multimodal remote learning and teaching methods. The government's commitment to provide all NSFAS students with electronic gadgets and data to facilitate effective remote learning. The phased-in return of university and TVET students to campus, guided by health and safety protocol based on different lockdown levels, with the current alert lockdown level 3 allowing for 33% of students. The articulation of the principle of no students should be left behind in efforts to complete the 2020 academic year. We commend Minister Nzimande for these initiatives. We have no doubt that an ANC government will continue to rise to the occasion and immerse itself in a quest to find a lasting solution to intractable challenges facing our people. Honorable members, at the beginning of the 2020 academic year, some universities experienced student protests for the variety of reasons. As a result, not much teaching and learning happened in those universities. For an example, the University of Fort Hare has not had any effective learning and teaching since the commencement of this academic year. partly as a result of the intransigence of the former administrator and management's inability to sit around the table to resolve the union students' demand. CPU, TIG, UKZN, UniZulu, and others were also impacted by student protests at the beginning of the year. So as we continue to save the 2020 academic year, these universities should be uppermost in our minds in ensuring that no student is left behind. Honorable members, education is at the center of any country's developmental agenda. No country can achieve sustainable economic development without investment in its human capital. The completion of the 2020 academic year must be one of the nation's non-negotiable priorities. If the 2020 academic year is not safe, that could impact adversely on the pipeline of learners from primary school to high school and to post-school education and training institutions. And it will therefore have knock-on effects in terms of addressing the skills deficit in the country. We must strengthen our resolve to eradicate the stark inequalities in the sector, whose true extent and character has been accentuated by this pandemic. The gap between the historically advantaged and disadvantaged universities is widening. It cannot be, members, that 26 years into a democratic dispensation, the class, racial, and gender realities of colonialism and apartheid education systems continues to be a permanent feature of our current higher education system. We owe it to the generation to confront this apartheid colonial legacy and to change it in favor of an egalitarian system of higher education. In tabling the adjustment budgets by the Minister of Finance on the 24th of June, due to weakened economic performance and the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, has necessitated that we debate today the revised budget of the department. In terms of the February budget, the total original budget of the department was 116.85 billion. The adjustments has resulted in the downward revision of the budget of the department with 9.85 billion. The bulk of it is due to a 4-month delay in skills levies contribution, which almost amounts to 8.12 billion. Honorable members, one of the topical issues we intend to engage with as we continue our oversight work is to continue to interrogate the question of institutional autonomy. The Constitution guarantees everyone to freedom of expression, which includes academic freedom and freedom of scientific research. These rights has to be protected at all costs. The 1997 White Paper on Education affirms institutional autonomy of universities. However, the White Paper cautions and argues that there is no moral basis for using the principle of institutional autonomy as a pretext to resisting democratic change or in defense of mismanagement. It further argues that institutional autonomy is therefore inextricably linked to the demands of public accountability, which implies that institutions are answerable for their actions and decisions, not only to their own governing bodies and institutional community, but also to the broader society. And therefore, we as the legitimate and democratically elected representatives of the people of this country, empowered by the injunctions of the constitutions and the rule of the National Assembly, stands ready to live up and practice both the letter and the spirit of the White Paper in holding the universities to account as organs of state and all other organs of state accountable. It is therefore in this context, Honorable House Chairperson, that the Portfolio Committee has resolved to conduct an inquiry into the appointment of Professor Mbati following various allegations that we've received as the committee. We intend to continue to discharge our constitutional mandate without any fear or favor. Honorable members, universities' funding will also be impacted by the COVID-19. Institutions received part of their funding from government subsidies, student fees, and third stream income. And due to economic inactivity, most of the companies and entities that are funding universities for research and other projects may not be able to continue this funding. And therefore, as a result of the loss of jobs, it will impact on the ability of the missing middle as well to pay their tuition and accommodation fees. And therefore, this is one of the issues that, as we continue to deal with the impact of the COVID-19, we need to take into consideration. Otherwise, the ANC stands to support the budget as tabled. Vote 17 of the Department of Higher Education and Training. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Bozoli.
Thank you, Chair. Those of you who are wondering where the 500 billion is that the President promised us
You may
to
proceed,
fund the
Honourable
fight against
Member.
COVID. Sorry? Can you hear me?
You may proceed, Honourable Member. Please
This
proceed.
is a destructive budget, and its destructiveness is not easy to see, so let me try and reveal it. The budget has been adjusted by Treasury by two amounts. One, suspension of funds totaling 6.7 billion, and one reduction in skills levy income of 8.1 billion. So this means that out of a budget of 86 billion, the department will be giving up 14.8 billion, or 16% of its normal expenditure. The department has made this amount look smaller, as we heard from the minister just now, by calling nearly 5 billion of it a suspension of funds rather than a cut. They call it a suspension because the money will stay in the department or its entities, but it will be forcibly used for COVID-related expenses. The department won't be able to use it for its normal expenditure and must reduce activities or services to pay for its own and others' COVID expenses. This is not the case in other departments, such as health, COCTA, or social development. Those departments will get more money because of COVID. That money will be taken from departments such as this one. So the multi-billion rand costs of mounting an entire higher education program for nearly 2 million students during the epidemic are to be borne by the department itself. Costs such as the provision of IT equipment, online teaching programs, PPE, and many others are to come out of the normal budget. To pay for this, the university subsidy has been cut by a substantial amount of 2.5 billion. This subsidy is normally used to pay for salaries, running costs, student costs, and research expenses. So serious are these cuts that vice chancellors are meeting urgently this week to discuss the future sustainability of universities. A proportionately similar cut, 312 million, has been made in TVET running costs. New infrastructure has been cut by a massive 1.1 billion, and the NSFAS budget has been reduced by 2.5 billion. You won't see most of these amounts reflected in the bottom line of the department because they are hidden there as COVID costs. Nevertheless, the cuts are real and they are happening already. The biggest cut of all is in the skills levy, which funds all 21 seaters. This 8.1 billion cut arises because the minister has granted a skills levy holiday to businesses during this difficult time. That was a good idea from the point of view of businesses, many of which are closing down. But its implications for post-school education are enormous. 42% of the seaters' income will not come in this year. Even if we assume there is a superfluous expenditure in the seater sector, it is obvious that this will seriously affect the training of thousands of people in critical skills needed for the economy. Courses will have to be stopped, students left in limbo, and small training providers might go out of business. So there is huge destruction underway in this department, brought on by COVID-19, but mainly hidden from view. This destruction is the fault of the ANC government, which has been so busy stealing money that there is none left for a crisis such as this one. More prudent and honest countries are able to pull together emergency funding. This government has failed to do so. Much of the president's 500 billion is a mirage. A large chunk of it is pulled from places like higher education, basic education, housing, and science and technology, to their long-lasting detriment. In the end, the president will claim to have found the money, but we will know where it comes from. We oppose this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Themba Kwayo.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Commissar.
As we speak here today.
Honourable Kaula, please switch off your microphone. You are distracting and disturbing your own member. That's very clever. Continue, Honourable Member.
Chairperson, as we speak here today, students at the University of Fort Hare do not know whether or not they will write exams. Unlike in your traditionally white universities, students at traditionally black universities such as Fort Hare, University of Limpopo, UKZN, and others have always struggled to get devices such as laptops, and they do not have data. The COVID pandemic has exposed deep fissures in society. It has demonstrated that we have not invested in building the necessary foundational blocks for prosperous nations. It has demonstrated the depth of the ideological bankruptcy of the liberation movement, which has persisted with the commodification of education inherited from the National Party, which has ensured the access to higher education remains largely an exclusive right of those who have money. Thousands of students from poor backgrounds are left out of the system because NSFAS is not merely enough to cover the education needs of the nations. The COVID-19 crisis has also exposed your persistent favoring of the traditionally white universities over universities that traditionally catered for Black people. Universities such as WITS and UCT are able to provide online largely because these universities are well capacitated, well resourced, with endless streams of funding. It is your hatred of yourselves as Black people that has allowed the situation to degenerate like this. It is your commodification of education that has condemned young, bright Black students to a life of hopelessness. The adjusted budget does not take any of these realities into account. It is stale in imagination and will certainly not lead up to the opening of institutions of higher learning for more disadvantaged Black youth. The country needs universal, fee-free higher education with a strong enabling state, with a comprehensive ideational capacity, everything you are not. We have put forward some very cogent proposals before on how to make this possible. We had previously said that there must be an overall annual education levy of 2.5% that is deducted from the pension funds. On its own, this will be sufficient to cover the full cost of free education for all. This will benefit both the employees and the employers. For employees, it will ensure that they and their children get access to free higher education into perpetuity. While the employers, this will ensure an endless supply of skilled labor. More importantly, this will not in any way affect the benefits employees must get from their pension funds when they retire. There will never be a time where all the employees will demand their pensions at the same time or retire at the same time. Secondly, we propose that there be an increase from 1% to 2% on the skills levy that employees contribute to the National Skills Fund. The government should, through target interventions, also introduce a corporate levy for higher education and deal decisively with financial flows. All this taken into account, the country would have sufficient finance to finance education of every deserving South African. And thus, this would happen without compromising other pressing needs that government must satisfy in this country. This adjusted budget does not appreciate the critical moment we are in as a country. It shows no imagination and does not consider the plight of students. Thus, the EFF rejects this budget adjustment. Thank you.
Commissar!
Yes,
Thank you,
yes,
Honourable Member.
Commissar.
The next speaker is the Honourable Noble.
Yeah, yeah,
He's not
yes,
good.
sir,
He's
yeah,
not.
The
yeah.
Honourable Noble.
Ayiphelaka.
Kumnandi kunjalo.
The next speaker is the Honourable Noble.
Person. I just want to join the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Honorable Mapulane, for commending the minister for a phased-in and an acceptable phased-in approach of students to institutions of higher learning. Honorable members, despite the fact that higher education contributes directly to higher productivity and more knowledge-based economy, this sector has seen no support in managing the COVID-19 pandemic. The supplementary budget's failure to provide additional funding to this important sector to support their efforts to manage the impact of the pandemic is a glaring omission. The country's vision to embracing the fourth industrial revolution rings hollow in the face of the supplementary budget. The COVID-19 pandemic has also undeniably shown the need to invest in higher education, science, and technology, not only to advance our society, but also to ensure we can adapt to future pandemics of this scale. Honorable members, the IFP fully acknowledges the burden of COVID-19 on this sector. In general, the IFP supports the department's budgetary adjustments, but undeniably the budget cuts amounting to 9.85 billion rand will have a long-lasting impact on the quality of higher education. South Africans invest a huge amount of their own income on higher education in the hope of a better future for their children. And yet, government does not share the same sentiments. We can obviously see how detached the government is from the people of this nation as they disinvest in an area where South Africans are investing. We are concerned about the impact that the reprioritization of funds will have on the abilities of the National Skills Fund and the Sector Education and Training Authority activities. Considering the mass unemployment our country faces, we need to know more than ever to ensure that we are investing in skills. The IFP also remains concerned about the loss of over 8 billion rand due to the reduced collection of skills levies. COVID demands infrastructure investing for distance learning. So how does government rationalize the 379.39 million rand budget cut in the infrastructure and efficiency development grant? Honorable members, if we want to ensure that the youth of today have a fighting chance to compete in the global economy, we need to invest much more in their skills development and embrace new technologies. We cannot allow the devastating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic to rob our youth of their opportunities to compete and contribute to our society. I thank you very much, Chairperson.
Well, thank you very much, Honourable Member. The next speaker will be the Honourable Boshoff.
Met 'n begroting van 'n miljard rand is hoër onderwys en opleiding die derde grootste begrotingspos in die Suid-Afrikaanse begroting. Hiervan gaan 80% na die universiteite. Die beurskema vir arme mense en die werkersklas NSFAS beloop byna 35 miljard rand. Dit beteken slegs 7 begrotingsposte of 8 as ons die res van hoër onderwys bytel, is groter as NSFAS. Mense sou dus dink dat NSFAS met die grootste sorg tot stand gebring sou word. Die teendeel is egter waar en sake is eers na die spreekwoordelike treinongeluk reggeruk. In die voorkeurlys vir besteding is hoër onderwys baie hoog. Dit word daardeur bevestig dat net 1,7 miljard rand as 'n netto bedrag van die aanvanklike 97,4 miljard rand met die noodbegroting besnoei is. Nog so wat 8 miljard rand het verlore gegaan omdat vaardigheidsheffings nie in 'n stilstaande ekonomie ingesamel kan word. Dit bring ons by die kernvraag van enige begroting. Kan die staat hierdie spesifieke besteding regverdig, dit bekostig en dit volhou? Which also involves the debate on decolonization and white privilege. The current political, economic, scientific, educational, and even recreational system is an outflow of the global predominance of the West century through conquest and affirmed during the 20th century through increasing globalization. It cannot be disputed that the child born within the continuity of Western civilization, even in a less privileged position, has an advantage to a child born out of that continuity. That was our Afrikaner experience of the early 20th century, when society in South Africa was thoroughly British. Such situation confront one with a threefold choice: to relinquish one's own identity in order to assume another, to complain about the injustice, or to compete head-on by fusing one's own background with the predominant systems of the time. The third choice can't be made on one's own. One needs a collective, and preferably a state, to do that. Japan was the first country to actually succeed in doing that, followed by the Southeast Asian tigers, China, India, and more recently several Arabian countries. As a matter of fact, that is what Europe did during the 11th and 12th centuries, when it emulated and appropriated knowledge which was first construed in Africa and Asia. Continued to with the classical civilizations of Greece and Rome with its own original contributions facilitated this. In this fusion of cultures, which is the only way to remove cultural disadvantage, universities play an indispensable role. The African university has the historical imperative to immerse itself in the Western academic tradition, but to remain African. Therefore, humanity should never be regarded as less important than the natural sciences. It would be highly advantageous to develop at least one Nguni and one Sotho language as languages of academy. It would be disadvantageous to regard Afrikaans as merely a barrier to entrance. However, these good things do not happen. Historically, at disadvantaged universities stick to English, and Afrikaners are branded as racist if they attempt to maintain their own legacy of decolonization. In the post-school education and training sector, funding is not a problem, execution is. Die begroting kan regverdig word as dit goed bestee word. Of dit na die ekonomiese vernietiging van die Grendelstaat volgehou kan word, tyd sal leer. Ek dank u.
Waar.
The next speaker will be the Honorable Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Honorable Manamela.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chairperson, honorable members of the National Assembly, Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation, Dr. Blake Nzimande, members of the Portfolio Committee, led by the Chair, Mr. Philip Makulane, our DG and all the officials from our department, chairpersons and CEOs of the higher education entities, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, we woke up to the news that Baba Andrew Mlangeni has passed away. And as a country, we mourn this loss and extend our condolences to his family. And I'd like to join all the other speakers who have paid tribute to our Rivonia trialists. The last of the Rivonia trialists is no more, and a golden generation of selfless leaders who exemplifies outstanding leadership are no longer with us. They've passed the baton, and their wisdom is imprinted on history, and we must continuously draw from this as we march on towards a national democratic society. It is in our hands, and the subsequent national lockdown has been deeply affected, has deeply affected the entire post-school education and training sector. Our department has analyzed the effects of COVID-19 on the sector. While the framework of saving lives, saving the academic year, and maximizing opportunities for success, we have been working closely with both public and private institutions to put measures in place to manage this COVID-19 effects and to mitigate the risks thereof. We, through the Minister, have been convening the DHET task team on COVID-19, involving key leaders from our related post-school education and training institutions. I must say that we've successfully managed to mobilize, albeit sometimes through difficulties. Our universities are continually adapting and transforming to meet the needs and demands of post-apartheid South Africa and indeed the world. The University Capacity Development Program is the primary instrument to promote transformation in university education in the areas of student access, staff development, career and program development. This year marks the final year of the first 3-year cycle of implementation, and planning is underway for the next 3-year cycle starting in January 2021. The next cycle will advance and strengthen the Nurturing Emerging Scholars Program, the New Generation of Academics Program, the University Staff Doctoral Program, and the Future Professors Program. And I hope that the Honourable Member from the EFF is listening quite closely, because these interventions are meant to produce Black academics, but are intended to ensure that we contribute towards the goals of the National Development Plan, but improve the quality of education, higher education in our universities. But what is even better is that we're not bettering the system for only one section of society, but for all South Africans, with due regard of obviously the historical challenges and imbalances that our country has been through. These critical programs are already contributing to staff transformation in the university sector. The disruption of teaching caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need to build multiple modalities of teaching and learning delivery. We must strengthen the digital modalities across university system in ways that addresses inequality and the digital divide, which clearly exists for institutions and for staff and students. In terms of curriculum reform and taking a broad view of curriculum that incorporates pedagogy and context, the UCDP will continue to support curriculum decolonization efforts by universities, including supporting universities to take forward capacity building for meaningful inclusion of indigenous knowledge system through building into their UCDP plan. Additionally, in the next 3 years, it is planned that at least 2 further centers for African languages teaching will be established at universities, and therefore addressing some of the concerns that the Honourable Member from the Freedom Front has been raising on the question of language. And I hope that he will encourage everyone else to take up different languages so that we appreciate the diversity and our demographics, but also the role that language can play in taking, or rather in clipping transformation, unity in our own country. The center will serve to build knowledge through research for the teaching and learning of African languages and develop tools and resources to support their teaching and learning, especially in early childhood education and throughout basic education schools. DHET will soon be publishing the revised language policy for public higher education institutions in the Government Gazette. And the policy, initially published in 2002, went through an extensive consultation process and review process. Its purpose is to ensure the development and strengthening of historically marginalized languages, indigenous languages as languages of scholarship, teaching, learning, and communication. The implementation of the policy will be supported and monitored across our public institutions in South Africa over the coming few years, and will therefore end the dominance of few languages, and we know what those languages are, and begin to open up access for many more people, particularly those who are non-Africans and non-English speaking people in the academic area. We are seeing greater stability in our skills development sector. The new SITA boards have been, as indicated, appointed with a mandate to improve governance and to make a stronger impact on skills development. While the 4-month holiday for skills development learning contributions, we acknowledge, Honourable Bozoli, have affected the SITA budgets and targets, all SETAs are drawing upon reserves and finding ways of achieving more with less. And I must say that it is our intention through the minister and everyone else to ensure that companies do continue to pay their SETA levies so that the skills revolution continue in our country. The Health and Welfare SETA will train 25,000 workers and union leaders on key health and safety things related to COVID-19, as well as deploy 1,290 social workers. I've listened to some of the criticism that some of the budget has been allocated towards dealing with COVID-19 related issues. But to be critical of that, yes, it's important, but I think it's also important to recognize that we're living in different times, which we haven't chosen to be under. And therefore, Honorable Bozoli, I think it's quite unfair to suggest that the department has dedicated so much resources towards responding to COVID-19. And in fact, and better than that, we have dedicated resources to ensure that we transform the system so that post-COVID-19, we're able to deal with some of the endemic challenges that embedded challenges that the higher education and training sector is faced with. We've exceeded our target of training 24,000 artisans in the last financial year. And of course, the numbers have been on the decline, but we're still committed to ensure that by the year 2030, we train 30,000 artisans per year. Our last count was around 21,000 artisans per annum, and we believe that we will, if we remain consistent and improve, ensure that we train even better. Due to COVID-19, we've obviously experienced the reduction of artisans. However, we plan to increase this target in the subsequent year. Our commissioned research has shown that trained artisans have an 81% absorption rate in the labor market. And even in this tough COVID-19 environment, we still encourage employers to prioritize skills development, especially for workplace-based learning programs such as apprenticeships, learnerships, internships, and work integrated learning. And this program is currently being implemented in 26 sites across 19 colleges and 13 trades. So far, 846 apprentices have been trained and 92 employers are participating in this particular program. The second intake of 1,050 apprentices at 29 sites is being planned, and this group was supposed to start in June 2020, but due to COVID-19, it had to be resolved. The Centers of Specialization Programs provides a model that can be used to implement programs to deliver occupational qualifications in partnerships with industries. Of course, there's more that we can say, but in conclusion, House Chair, Cabinet has approved the policy framework to address gender-based violence in the post-school system, and this policy has been developed together with our higher health an agency established by the department, and we plan to ensure that we roll out this policy, which has been widely consulted. And as the president said, that gender-based violence is one of, that it should be dealt with parallel with dealing with COVID-19. Our department and our ministry continues to be committed to fighting gender-based violence on our campuses, and we call everyone to join in that endeavor. We're more committed that even under the current circumstance, we will be able to keep the ship afloat and maintain our consistent programs of transforming the higher education and training system. Thank you very much, House Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Minister. The next speaker is the Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Allow me first of all to welcome the manner in which the Minister has handled the issue of the 2020 academic year under very, very difficult circumstances with COVID-19 and the pandemic before us. But Honourable Chair, allow me to quote a very famous words of our former icon, former President Nelson Mandela, when he said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Now, having said that, Honorable Chairperson, I want us to be mindful of a few things, and I know the Minister said that endeavors are being put in place to ensure that laptops are provided and things. But we must also be mindful under the circumstances which many of these students live, particularly having problems with network, with data, with signal, the poor housing conditions where many of them are occupying single rooms. So there's a whole lot of difficulty that comes with it. But very importantly, and a matter of concern for the NFP is the 60% dropout that you have in the first year. Added to that is the challenges that we're facing where the TVET colleges particularly are not talking to the skills needs of the country, which is resulting in mass unemployment or youth that are unemployment after having completed their tertiary education. And I think it's a matter that we need to look at to see how we could actually coordinate the needs of the country together with the tertiary institutions. Now, another matter of concern is the high levels of substance abuse among students and youth, of course, particularly those that are living in residential units, to a very large extent, those that are not in the premises of the institutions themselves. We think that that is another matter that needs to be addressed. I think what we need to look for is value for money, that the amount of money that is being provided, particularly with NSFAS and things. It's not only the issue of giving education or giving the resources, but it's also what you're getting back, whether the students are doing their best in being able to ensure that we are going to get value for the money that is being spent on them, so that we can create a better society. You know, I want to give one more quote where our former president said that no country can really develop unless its citizens are educated. So what does it mean? The opportunity that is being given here is an opportunity to educate this nation and this youth so that they can be productive, because remember, they are the future of this country. And if the education that we are providing them, if they do not take advantage of it, then indeed it means it's wasted resources that could be spent on others that are deserving. The National Freedom Party will support this adjustment budget here tabled here today under this very difficult circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Sheikh Imam. The next speaker is the Honorable Malaniso.
Thank you, Chair. Ministers, Deputy Ministers, honorable members, and fellow South Africans. PSET training system is one of the key enablers of creating a prosperous nation. Unemployment, poverty, and inequality will not be addressed without a skilled population that meaningfully participate in the economy. The NDP identified the technical and vocational education training colleges, CET colleges, as key institutions to expand access to post-school schooling to develop the country's skill base. We salute our frontline workers who risk their lives for the safety of all South Africans against the invisible enemy. We salute all public sector training workers who are contributing in making sure students continue to learn. COVID-19 has led to the need to adjust budget allocations. The funding allocation is anchored by the principle consistent with the African saying that says, the reallocation ensures the mandate of the department is not hindered by the budget cuts. Government priority for a new funding model, norms and standards by 2021 will boost the colleges. Community education training colleges closes the skills gaps among students who get admitted in TVET colleges and universities. The high dropout rate in our schools leave many people with no further training, with perpetuated poverty and unemployment. State SA estimates over 18 million people cannot obtain admission in TVET colleges and universities. The NDP targets 1 million enrollments by 2030 in CET. CET colleges face enormous resource limitations as they were established in 2015 with 9 colleges. TVET colleges are all affected by the adjustment budgets. Limitations within the TVETs are mainly due to the lack of institutional capacity to maintain stable governance and financial management, which should be strengthened. The original budget allocation of the TVET program is adjusted downwards by 739 million rand from 13.8 billion. The bulk of the cuts are in infrastructure-related allocation. The CET allocation decreased by 8.8 million rand from original allocation of 2.5 billion. mainly from compensation of employees, goods and services. The department has prioritized the phasing in of learning guided by the principle of no student should be left behind. For the 2021 financial year, the department targeted to have 700,000 and 375 headcount enrollments in the TVET and CET colleges, respectively. COVID-19 has changed higher education and training and learning, creating a need to introduce e-learning. The department has created collaborations with publishers to provide e-guides with the appropriate curriculum through applications that can be downloaded from. The department adjusted its budget to avail 2.5 billion procurement of digital devices for NSFAS-supported students, including TVET students. All TVET websites contain learning material at no cost. The TVET sector will complete the third trimester for the year 2020 in 2021. The development of 32 new occupational qualifications by the Quality Council for Trades and Occupation creates opportunities in response to the industry needs. In conclusion, Honorable Minister, when I was conducting my oversight in one of the District D2, I met one of the youngest lecturer, Thapelo Metasi, and I asked him, what is it that is interesting about the CDT? He said to me, the sector is better than before and more needs to be done. Young people and adults should take advantage of TVET colleges and CET colleges as they give them second chance opportunity to acquire skills, knowledge, training in order to contribute positively to the economy and sustainable livelihoods. The long-standing acting position of the DDGs in both the TVET and CET programs is concerning, Minister. We implore the Minister to fast-track the filling of this position. The ANC support the adoption of the budget.
Thank you, Honorable Member. For the Honorable Member, I will now invite the Honorable Kasa, who will preside over the rest of this mini plenary. At the same time, I wish to recognize the Honorable Nchaisa.
Honorable Chairperson.
Okay. Please proceed.
Honorable Chair, can you hear me?
Please proceed.
Between the
Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson.
Please proceed, Honorable Member.
Oh, thank you very much. Chairperson, let me start off by conveying condolences to the family of the late struggle icon and the hero of Rivonia trial, Date Andrew Mlangeni. May his soul rest in peace. Chairperson, like all other departments, this Department of Higher Education and Training has been affected by COVID-19 pandemic. The Finance Minister therefore had to effect a budget cut to respond to this pandemic. This means other programs and activities cannot be carried out. Chairperson, as a result of this, there are many challenges that are facing this department. Chairperson, many of the students in the tertiary institutions are facing a lot of challenges. For these challenges, I can squarely put blame on the TVET colleges and universities. These institutions have been assisted by the department, but they are not prepared to assist the students. Many students in the remote areas are not receiving any data, no provision of laptops, so they have been complaining all along about this, more especially the University of Sisulu and Fort and the other universities. They've been told not to do this learning on the line learning, which is very much impossible without data and laptops. So they can't connect technologically. So they are suffering a lot, Honorable Chairperson. This online learning, Chairperson, has become very much impossible for such students. Some have not received the allowances. It's more than 2 months now. Those in the urban areas and the well-to-do students can start through this online learning. It means now it is just the survival of the fittest. which is not good for our education. Therefore, the challenges of inequality features in these instances, Honorable Chairperson. The department now cannot be blamed for all this. I'm pleading with the Minister of Higher Education and Training to make a follow-up on the announcement that he made that no student will be left behind. Many chairpersons are being left behind. So your intervention, Honorable Minister, would be very much appreciated in this instance. These institutions, remember, should be held accountable and they should toe the line. They should not just be left independent and do just as they feel, because they are being assisted or subsidized by the department. Chairperson, as AIC, we do support this budget vote because it is for the service delivery. So our people now should not suffer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Nchaisa. The next speaker should be from COPE, but there's no name. Is there a speaker from COPE? The next would be from PAC. Then the next speaker is Honorable Nodada. Over to you.
Mhlali ngaphambili malunga bekekileyo fellow South African
honorable members, greetings to you all.
Yes, Kubeka Buntu.
I'm trying to struggle to understand, to hear the speaker.
Can you?
We can't hear the speaker.
Honorable Nodada.
Chair, I was interrupted, so I hope my time will be corrected there. Mhlali ngaphambili malunga bekekileyo fellow South Africans.
Members and fellow South African, good afternoon.
Thank you.
Chair, I'm being interrupted here.
That's the interpreter, Mr. Nodada.
It's interpretation.
It's interpretation, Honorable Nodada.
Okay, sure.
But why are we hearing it?
Okay, sure.
Please proceed.
Namhlanje andizuyicikoza lento.
Hey, I'm not going to beat around the bush.
The ANC government is deliberately miseducating and misskilling young South Africans through poor quality education that is not relevant for the job market, industry, innovation, and entrepreneurship. The setup in some campus environment has buildings falling apart, no student accommodation, outdated curriculum, which the ANC has failed to review since 2018, and no access to the internet. In particular, TVET colleges students are not taken seriously and often left behind by this government. And TVETs need to rise. I speak here on behalf of TVET students whom are forced to study in dilapidated buildings with no Wi-Fi, campuses with no student accommodation, while NSFAS gives half the funds for off-campus accommodation to a TVET student compared to a university student whom are often backroom dwellers, and there was no practical workshops with outdated material and equipment. Changing this has become an old talk with no action for years, regardless of statements made by government on this platform like the minister has done. The ANC government is clearly not serious about quality skills development, which can only be done in a conducive learning environment that will set up young people of this country for success. The president told the country in February that 9 TVET college campuses are being completed, yet DHET has cut the budget to operationalize these campuses by half. Furthermore, 1 billion meant to address the backlog in maintenance and refurbishments for TVETs to fix dilapidated buildings, building on-campus residences, and digitizing campuses, starting with Wi-Fi access, has been cut. This happens after 739 million of the TVET infrastructure grant was cut in the previous budget. There is no funding set aside for software in the TVET examination system, which has led to 134,000 certification backlog, leaving many graduates at home, despite the deputy minister saying that day zero would come this year. I have no doubt that the ANC government will continue to blame all of this on apartheid. However, we must come to learn that whilst colonialism and apartheid placed South Africans in a state of economic disempowerment, it's the ANC government that ANC government's corruption and mismanagement that has kept them there. NSFAS is a prime example of the ANC government's corruption and mismanagement. The corruption has robbed poor students of 7.5 billion due to irregular expenditure, inclusive of 5.3 million to the VBS Bank of taxpayers' money meant for poor student allowances. What is more painful is that when money is needed the most, it has been cut or reprioritized and lost to corruption. Minister Nzimande announced that all poor students will receive devices, and a month ago, yet 2.5 billion meant to purchase these devices for poor students to access remote learning has been suspended and not available, meaning that poor students are being left behind at the University of Fort Hare, VUT, and other campuses, while many continue with remote learning. Minister Nzimande must ensure that students are not left behind, and money is being prioritized to make sure that they get their allowances in going into the 2020-2021 academic year that has been extended. The minister must request funding for poor students in order for them to procure devices to access remote learning. DHET and NSFAS must revisit the guidelines to make provisions for TVET's allowances, at least for food and accommodation, to be standardized as per universities, and allow students to purchase devices. We welcome the overhaul of NSFAS as the DA has been calling for this for years, and we urgently request the minister to expedite the process to appoint a CEO and a CFO so as to better manage taxpayers' money, and most importantly, ensure that poor students are properly funded. The National Treasury must take over functions for the strong monitoring and evaluation to ensure that spending of the TVET infrastructure grant is there to maintain existing buildings without ANC cadres demanding tenders. We cannot support a budget that pays little to no attention on the quality of qualifications, infrastructure, and the amount of funding invested in developing TVET that seeks to keep poor students in a cycle of perpetual poverty without a decent education. Any form of economic empowerment
your time is up,
remain just elusive.
Honorable, your time is up. The next speaker is Honorable, let's see.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the session. Let me take this opportunity first and foremost to send our condolences to the family of Comrade Mapiti Matsena, who was brutally killed last week Wednesday. The creation of a developmental state that drives economic development and addresses socio-economic inequality in our country requires a skilled people. The Department of Higher Education plays a critical role in ensuring the skills development of the country responds to the skills demand of the economy. CETAS plays a pivotal role in mainstreaming sectoral training to support sector skills development. The skills development levy revenue will be negatively impacted by the 4-month levy payment holiday, which had been granted to all employers during the first phase of lockdown. Improved financial management and combating of crime and elimination of irregular expenditure is needed now more than ever before to derive the best outcomes with limited resources that these sectors will have this financial year. The coronavirus pandemic will have a negative impact on this sector. We hope this pandemic will only affect those abanezandla, Minister, ngathi le COVID ingaya kubo kuphela iyeke abanye abasebenza kahle kulama city. The economic recovery post COVID-19 should create ample training opportunities for students to acquire work exposure and to complete their studies. CETAs will place their priority on expanding postgraduate training and their employment opportunities. The NSFAS has been facing numerous financial and governance challenges. The appointed administrator has led the institution to continuous improvement trajectory. This includes addressing irregular expenditure that Honorable Nodata just spoke about now, with various matters before law enforcement agencies. We, however, note the issues that are raised by NEHAU and other workers. The number of students that were supported by NSFAS for 2019 was 414,000, while TVET students were just over 295 students. At the moment, NSFAS has funded 42% of all university students. So we don't know when we are told that NSFAS is worse, when we are funding almost half of all university students, what are they talking about? Contrary to critics, NSFAS funded students perform 10% better than the national cohorts. That is why the national dropout, the NSFAS dropout rate was 10% lower than that one of all students in the country. The department has also paid attention to historic deaths, and that is why 55,000 students deaths was cleared. This pandemic will affect the department entities like SAQA from generating revenue. The inability to receive enough revenue constitutes 56% of its projected annual income, and this will negatively affect the mandate of this entity. SAQA has an unbroken record of unqualified audit opinions in its 23-year history. The institution must be lauded for efficient use of public resources. They plan to automate their registration of qualification and qualification verification processes to improve efficiency, with the current turnaround being 4 months from day of submission. And once the planned IT workflow systems are put in place, this target will go down to from 3 to 3 weeks. The only material change to entities in reprioritization of this 2.5 billion, and Honorable Bozoli, I think you will listen, you have to listen to this one. 2.5 billion in NSFAS to fund the procurement of digital devices, which are critical for the completion of the academic year. This digital devices procurement will continue to add value post the pandemic, improving learning in the sector. We asked, yes, this one maybe we may agree with these ones who like making noise, but we hope, Minister, that this procurement of these devices will not be given to friends, and allegations of fraud and corruption will not be there, like we're hearing now in institutions like the VUT on procurement of such devices. Universities usually receive a 5% increase in university applications yearly, but this year, because of the fee-free higher education that the ANC-led government proposed, has led to a 20% increase this year alone. And I think maybe it is at this time where I must try and assist the opposition. I hope, Honorable Nodada, when you came, that you'll at least try and give us something contrary to what Honorable Bozoli was giving. Both of you combined, really, you have given us nothing but complaints. You like to blame the ANC for everything. You're blaming us. The only thing you have not blamed us on now is the growing of trees. At least that you have not blamed us on. But everything else you are blaming the ANC. I'm sure you are even including, you are blaming us for the fact that the leader of the DA, Honorable Steenhuisen, only has Standard 4. I'm sure you also want to blame the ANC from that. On Dr. Tembekwayo, really, maybe, you may be forgiven because you have not attended any of our deliberations, but your argument that the students of Venda, the student of Forte will be left behind, it's fallacy. We have said there must be no one left behind, because especially these ones from Venda, from Ungoye, from Forte, and all other HDIs, they must never be left behind. They must not be punished for being in those HDI institutions. Honorable Bishop, I'm sure you've decided to speak in Afrikaans because you only wanted few people to hear you not saying anything. Because really, there's nothing that you've said. No one has ever said we want to exclude Afrikaners from this, from learning and teaching. No one has ever said that. But we are saying you must acknowledge that Afrikaners in this country played a pivotal role in excluding many of our people from participating in the mainstream economy of this country.
Ja, daar sê die helfte van die waarheid, hoor.
We have asked the department to look.
Your time is up, honorable member.
Okay, thank you very much.
Your time is up.
Then
You said nothing anyway.
You call this sweeping. Is this sweeping?
You did very
wasting
well.
our time. Shut up.
You don't know that apartheid is the latest stage of capitalism. Colonization of a special type.
You did very well, Kebo. Jy het hulle geslaan. Dankie.
Long live
Can I call Education, Science and Technology. Dr. Blade Nzimande, over to you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. I must say that I've been now put off the bioscope. It's saying here the host has stopped me, so I'm not deliberately hiding. Let me take this opportunity to thank all the members who have supported this budget. And also want to assure, of course, Honorable Chair Mapulane, that it remains my commitment and that of government to tackle the very important matter that he is raising of the need to address institutional inequalities in our institutions. I must say that Honorable Pozzoli, we are with you. No one likes reduction of budgets. But we are faced with the situation that we are faced with now, and we've got to go and take from the same pot. So, but what worries me, you talk as if it's not important to address COVID-19, as if taking money to address COVID-19 is a waste, which it is not a waste, because the challenge we are faced with as government, as this department, is balancing between saving lives and sustaining livelihoods. That is the issue that we are faced with. Honorable Tembekwayo, honestly, you can't commodify by spending 35 billion rands in 1 year to support poor and working class students with NSFAS. Otherwise, you are arguing for your non-starter, that you must also fund the children of the rich and those who can afford and give them NSFAS. That's not gonna happen. Those who can afford must be able to pay for them for themselves. We are sympathetic to the EFF's position that skills levy should be increased. Now, Honorable Boshoff, all what I'm always persuading you to do, go and look at what the African leadership did with poor whites. All what we are doing is the same thing. The only difference is that we are addressing the interests of the poor in order to build an inclusive society, rather than to build an oppressive, exclusive society like the African leadership did under apartheid. Thanks, Sheikh Imam, for supporting our budget. I also want to say, by the way, we are not only using online learning, we are using multimodal interventions, and also that we are revising curricula and doing lecturer development in order to improve the TVET colleges. And to Honorable Mananiso, I take your point. I'll be advertising the DDG post very soon, in a matter of weeks now. And let me say that no student will be left behind, as the AIC is saying, including doing catch up once the students actually go back to institutions, if they did not manage to get all the support. Lastly, Chair, we are not, Honorable Notat, we are amazing. In the portfolio committee, something else. Once you are in this platform, you're something else. You know, we are the first ones as the AIC to say there's still a lot to be done with TVET colleges, but we've already done a lot. Infrastructure maintenance, curriculum, is commendable. The fact that there's still much more to be done does not mean that we have not done anything. We're very proud as the department for the work that we've actually done. With those, thank you very much to everyone who participated in the debate, and to you, Chairperson Siyabonga.
Honorable members, we have come to the end of the session.
Plate.
The session
Plate.
is adjourned. Thank you very much.
No pala.
Thank you.
Kuba komanisi, Kuba. Komanisi, Kuba komanisi.
Yeah. Cuba play. Cuba play. Thank you.
Yeah, bro.